Ah yes, the world of big-screen animated adaptations of Saturday morning cartoons. You have some worthy ones that take the characters on a sprawling adventure and feel like a genuine movie fit for the cinematic format. And then you have those which merely exist as extended episodes and don't offer much of an experience beyond what you can see on television for free. We find the latter in two films I'm going to compare today. Widely considered two of the weakest cartoon film adaptations, Jetsons the Movie and Doug's First Movie, really did not belong in theaters, and also felt outstretched with tacked-on environmental themes and did not take the characters in new directions. But which is worse? I'll explore that today. Funnily enough, both films came about not because of the series' original runs, but rather the success of their revivals. Despite being considered a close cousin to the Flintstones, the Jetsons was nowhere near as long-lasting in its original incarnation, running a single season on ABC before getting cancelled. Its subsequent success in reruns led to a revival in the 1980s, long after Hanna-Barbera's golden age, and is most famous for featuring early animation work from Ren and Stimpy creator John Kricfalusi. The revival's Saturday morning success led to the movie being produced. Doug was famously one of the original three Nicktoons, but Jim Jenkins' unique deal with Nickelodeon meant he could take the show elsewhere if the network canceled the show. They did, and thus Disney stepped up to the plate and outright purchased the rights to Doug, leading to new episodes being produced as Disney's brand spanking new Doug. Doug was instrumental in ABC's One Saturday Morning being the highest rated block of that time slot, so naturally a Doug movie was made. The immediate thing to notice in both of these movies is how uninvolving the plots are. Jetsons the Movie mixes a number of storylines together, involving George getting a new position at Spacely Sprockets, leading to the family moving to a new apartment complex, Elroy having a brief rivalry with a robot who then becomes his friend, and Judy having boy troubles. What does Jane Jetson do in this movie? Not much. She is pretty much sidelined. A lot of the family members are separated through a lot of the film. George's arc is fairly weak, and the only sort of character development happens in the third act, when he learns his lesson. And what lesson is that? Not to drill holes in the asteroid where the Ewoks, the Grungies, live. Yep, this film has an environmental message. I think we've gotten better in recent years in writing environmental lessons in family entertainment, but subtlety was not something the 80s and 90s prevailed in. It really hammers the message in, and then gets confusing when the film ends with the Grungies getting hired to make the sprockets. Except I just keep wondering where these new sprockets come from. The film never really answers that question, so we're sort of left to assume they're drilling their own home. Doug's First Movie, meanwhile, has Doug trying to woo Patty Mayonnaise like he always did on the series. They had a cute friendship on the show, and don't get me wrong, I like Doug. However, he's hardly a character whose dynamics translate to a longer feature-length format. So what we do get is a fairly boring and drawn-out film. Even the other major storyline of Doug and Skeeter fighting the monster of Lucky Duck Lake most resorts to obvious cliches and the expected jokes about the monster eating things he shouldn't, and even disguising the monster to hide him in school. The filmmakers try to throw in a pollution plot, but it's fairly forced so we can have Bill Bluff be the villain and add more conflict. Animation-wise, neither film is remarkable. In the case of Doug's First Movie, there has been little to no upgrade to the animation quality, making it look even more like an extended episode of the show and no place in a theatrical space. However, I don't blame Jim Jenkins and his animation team for that. When making the film, the intention was to have it go straight to video. There were even trailers on assorted Disney videos released in late 1998 advertising this.
Only in this all-new movie event.
Freeze! Ha! What the?
Disney presents the first Doug movie ever. Premiering only on video, March 1999.
However, the Rugrats movie ended up being a big hit for Paramount and Nickelodeon, leading Disney to make the last-minute decision to send Doug's First Movie straight to cinemas. Jetsons the Movie does not have the same excuse to fall back on. It was always intended as a theatrical film. Hanna-Barbera's television shows hardly had high quality animation, but they were somewhat forgivable considering the budgets they had to work with. However, if you're going to make a big screen animated release, you need to have really great animation to justify paying the ticket price to see it. However, Jetsons the Movie just looks shoddy a lot of the time, with characters being frequently off-model and jerking around. The use of computer-generated elements also comes across as distracting. CGI was still in its infancy at that point. Disney recognized that when they included computer-generated effects in their films and only used them in a way that would fit seamlessly with the hand-drawn animation. The CGI in Jetsons the Movie sticks out like a sore thumb, and it seems they only used them because they could. However, I will admit there are two nicely animated scenes in the movie. First, the opening does a really good job of taking the familiar Jetsons opening and making it large and grand with an excellent orchestral rearrangement by John Debney. The other one is the You and Me sequence, mostly because the great Bob Kurtz was responsible for the animation, so the quality is a lot higher than the cheap Hanna-Barbera animation seen on the rest of the movie. It's a shame that sequence has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the story and does nothing to progress the plot. It's an example of how Jetsons the Movie immediately dates itself to the period it was made. In a desperate attempt to boost ticket sales, Universal controversially hired then pop star Tiffany to replace Janet Waldo as the voice of Judy. So she gets a couple of songs, and she's also mostly directed to act like a whiny teenage girl. Her romance is of little interest, and yet it gets a significant amount of screen time, despite contributing absolutely nothing of value and importance. For films set in the far future, everything about Jetsons the Movie screams the late 80s and early 90s. While nowhere near as pandering, Doug's first movie is also guilty of adding unnecessary screen time and plot points. Outside of playing a minor role in the finale, I'm not sure why we spend so much screen time with Roger wanting to build a robot. It's such obvious padding, as is the dream sequence with Doug as Quailman. I understand they had to throw Quailman in there somewhere, but the scene goes on for a while and does not tell us anything new, because we already know Doug wants to impress Patty and he's jealous of the school dance coordinator guy. It's only there because Quailman. Yet despite all of that, Doug's parents and older sister Judy are hardly in the movie. I don't even recall seeing his baby sister anywhere. The next door neighbor gets more to do. Despite a cute creature playing a pivotal role in Doug's first movie, the Disney film somehow feels less merchandise-driven. Throughout Jetsons the Movie, I felt like I was being sold record albums and plush toys. Not only do we get the Tiffany songs and the grungies, but Elroy gets both a robot sidekick and an alien friend called a Furbelow. The priority of the Jetsons movie seemed to be elsewhere, more so than telling a strong story with these beloved space-age characters. So in the end, which is worse? I'm going to say Jetsons the Movie. Despite its 77-minute runtime, Doug's first movie still feels long, drawn-out, and boring. The characters are not expanded beyond what they were like on television, and the animation had no place playing in cinemas nationwide. And yet, it still feels more sincere than the Jetsons movie. While the show did not need a movie, especially not one given a theatrical release, the characters are still themselves, and it is admittedly sweet when we see Doug and Patty dance together in the final scene, especially for longtime viewers of the show. Jetsons the Movie does a disservice to the characters by forcing George Jetson into both the workaholic father plot and an environmental storyline. Despite a couple of neat animated sequences, it feels like a product made to sell toys and CDs, and a prime example of why Hanna-Barbera needed young talents like Genndy Tartakovsky and Craig McCracken to spice up the animation studio in the mid-90s. It's probably not surprising both the Jetsons and Doug did not show up in media often after this. Recently, the Jetsons got a direct-to-video movie with wrestlers, and Warner Brothers Animation is supposedly working on a new animated movie. Meanwhile, Jim Jenkins wants to revive Doug, and Nickelodeon is interested too. The rights are just tied up with Disney, and they're not budging, even though they have not done anything with the character in over a decade. Come on, Disney, don't be greedy. License the rights to Marvel, Nick. But tell me, which movie do you think is worse? And I'll see you next time.